This sad story has more questions than answers. This is about a man who died after a barroom fight in Mazatlán on the Mexican coast. He was born in 1830 in Pennsylvania, yet he refused to stop fighting for the Confederacy at the end of the war. A drunken quarrel with his only friend, and a pistol shot to the arm. Days later, Lockjaw finished what the bullet started. He was 35. His name was Dan Showalter. He is not my direct ancestor, but he's my third cousin, 4 times removed. I don't descend from him, but we share a common ancestor. His name belongs to my mother, and once I found him in my family tree, I couldn't look away. The historian who wrote a book about him said he was a fascinating and baffling character who probably deserved a better fate. I think that's the fairest thing anyone has ever said about him. Ultimately, he seems to be a tortured soul. To understand Dan Showalter, you have to start where his family and mine are still the same family, and then watch how far he traveled from it. The ancestor we share is Jacob Showalter, born in 1702, Dan's second great-grandfather, and further back still on my own line. Jacob's people were Mennonites, pacifists. Around 1750, Jacob brought the family across the ocean to Pennsylvania among the plain German-speaking farmers who came precisely because the colony promised they'd never have to take up arms. He and his wife raised 12 children, and all but one stayed in the faith. Then, in 1756, the frontier caught up with them. An Indian raid tore through the family of Dan's great-grandmother and killed most of them. Except for Peter, all the Showalters were spared. And Dan's great-grandfather, Ulrich, married Susanna Watterson, whose parents were killed in the raid. Ulrich became the one member of Jacob's household to break the peace and carry a musket in the Revolutionary War. The drift kept going. Dan's own father married a Catholic woman from Ireland, another step from the Mennonite religion. By the time Dan was born, the pacifism was 3 generations behind him. What was left was the frontier and the fighting. He was born in 1830 in Greene County, southern Pennsylvania. Hill country, hard country, and like tens of thousands of his generation, the news out of California pulled him west. He came in 1852 and settled in Coulterville in the Mariposa goldfields, mining a place called Horseshoe Bend. Here's the first thing to understand about him. He was good at being liked. Big, physical, quick to laugh, the kind of man other men followed without quite deciding to. That talent carried him out of the diggings and into politics. In 1857, the 6th District sent him to the California State Assembly, a miner from Pennsylvania, not yet 30, walking the marble halls in Sacramento.
Birthday of the Seth. It's at 1860.
He should have been a success story. Instead, he arrived just as the country was coming apart. And Dan Showalter was not a man built to stay on the safe side of a line. By the winter of 1861, the southern states were leaving the Union. California stayed, but not everyone in it wanted to. When the Assembly took up a resolution pledging the state's loyalty, Showalter voted against it. During the debate, a fellow assemblyman named Charles Piercy cut him off, refused to let him explain his vote. The two had words, and in 1861, for a certain kind of man, Words like those ended only one way. Piercy challenged him to a duel. Dueling was already illegal in California. It happened anyway. Saturday, May 25, 1861, a field west of San Rafael. Rifles, not pistols, 40 yards. The first exchange missed. A wiser man might have called it there. Showalter demanded a second fire. The second shot struck Piercy in the mouth and killed him. It was the last duel ever fought between political figures in California. My cousin ended an era by killing a colleague over a point of pride. Courage and ruin, folded together, impossible to pull apart. Now he was a fugitive, a killer, wanted by the law, in a state that had chosen the Union. So he ran south to Los Angeles County, where secessionists were gathering in secret. Their plan was audacious: cross the deserts along the old Butterfield Stage Road, slip into the Confederacy, and take up arms. Showalter and about 15 others set out in November of 1861. They didn't get far. On November 29th, a patrol of the 1st California Cavalry ran them down at Minter Ranch and marched them to Fort Yuma. To get out, he did something that should have shamed him the rest of his life. He swore an oath of allegiance to the United States, signed it, walked free in April 1862. And then he broke it immediately and rode for Texas. In Texas, for the first time, his recklessness found a use. He was commissioned lieutenant colonel of the 4th Texas Cavalry, the Arizona Brigade. He chased Comanche raiders. He fought along the Rio Grande, and in March 1864, he joined the old Texas Ranger Rip Ford, driving Union forces out of the lower valley. It worked. On June 30th, 1864, Showalter's men occupied Brownsville. This was the peak, a fugitive Pennsylvanian duelist from the gold fields, now a Confederate colonel holding a river town at the edge of a collapsing nation. If the story ended here, you could almost call it redemption. Unfortunately, it does not end here. The thing that had always controlled his actions, the thing that demanded a second shot at 40 yards, was the drink. When his commander fell ill and the army needed Showalter to lead, he was found drunk, unable to command. And then came the strangest battle of the war. May 12th and 13th, 1865, more than a month after Lee had already surrendered in Virginia, troops collided at Palmito Ranch. The last land battle of the American Civil War, fought over a war that was already over. Was this the beginning of the Lost Cause movement, or simple stubbornness? Maybe there was no difference. Showalter was drunk again. When the guns opened up, his regiment panicked with no one to lead them. Another officer had to ride in and save the line. Showalter was relieved of command on the spot. Ironically, the Confederacy won that pointless last battle of the war. However, Showalter was lost in a bottle. When the war ended, he would not accept that it had ended. Rather than surrender, he crossed into Mexico in the summer of 1865, one of the last unreconstructed rebels, unwilling to go home to a country that had beaten him. He landed in Mazatlán and managed a hotel, and this is where the road ran out. In early 1866, he got drunk in his own bar room and wrecked it. When his Confederate buddy and bartender told him to stop, Showalter struck him. The man drew a pistol and shot him in the arm. The wound alone might not have killed him, but lockjaw set in. There was no saving him. He died far from Pennsylvania, far from the gold fields, far from Sacramento and Brownsville, far from everyone who had ever followed him. I don't come to Dan Showalter to defend him. He killed a man over an insult. He broke a sworn oath. He fought for a cause built on holding other human beings in bondage, and he was too drunk to lead even that. But I won't pretend he was simple. He could be both brave and reckless, and in his life those were never two different things, only the same thing, pointed at different targets. He isn't my direct ancestor. I don't carry his choices, and I don't owe them a defense, and maybe that's exactly why I can look at him straight. But we share old Jacob, the Mennonite who crossed an ocean so his children would never have to fight. 4 generations down that same tree, one of them became this. And here's the last strange turn. That battlefield is still out there, flat coastal scrub at the bottom of Texas, on a 2-lane road called Boca Chica, about 14 miles east of Brownsville. Keep driving east on that same road, and it doesn't end at a monument. It ends at Starbase. SpaceX built its launch site at the very edge of the Palmito Ranch battlefield. So the last battlefield of America's oldest war is now the doorway to its newest frontier. Coincidentally, the mother's maiden name of the man launching rockets near this battlefield is Haldeman. The Haldemans were also Mennonites who arrived in Pennsylvania in the 1700s. Both the ancient Haldemans and the Showalters were forced out of Switzerland in 1671 because they refused an oath to fight for the Grand Council of Bern. Dan's path is not my path. However, we've all strayed from the Mennonite path, including the rocket man who wants to colonize Mars. This video is one in a series of brief biographical sketches of family members. Please subscribe to this channel if you enjoy this type of storytelling, even if these aren't your relatives. These videos cannot capture every aspect of my relatives' lives. Books do a better job of documenting details. However, I use the latest technologies to make major historical circumstances and events in their lives more vivid.